Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's eClaims webinar. My name is Patty Gray, and I will be hosting today's webinar along with Michael Hunter, Kim Smith, and Sue Sheese on behalf of the eClaims team. We ask you to please keep your phone lines muted as we will be using the chat feature to receive your questions if time permits. Please enter your questions throughout the presentation in the chat box located on the right side of your screen. Use the drop-down to send your questions to the panelists. You can also hover over the WebEx tab at the top of your screen and click on Chat. We will answer as many of your questions as we can, but if you have questions that we don't get to today or think of something after the session ends, we will be providing you with resources at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the eClaims presentation page. Today we will be covering 3.1 news and 3.1 changelog updates. We will also take questions at the end of today's webinar. First, we'll review eClaims' recent news since the October webinar. The 3.1 transaction reports is now on the eClaims homepage. We suggest that you review these reports for 3.1 implementation. The summary of changes 3.0 to 3.1 document has been moved to the archives page for 3.1. Any further updates can be found on the changelog posted on the eClaims 3.1 page. You will find the August webinar slide deck on the eClaims presentation page. The 3.1 edit matrix and 3.1 changelog have been updated and are posted on the 3.1 page under the New York requirement table section. Numbers 236 through 243 list these updates for you. We have removed the reference to the reduced benefit amount code value of Z for net to zero, as we won't be implementing this until after 3.1 is implemented. The second worksheet was updated, so the full denial reason code mapping, row 2, matches the 3.1 FAQ number 14, which states, since New York doesn't accept SHROI 02 to update these data elements, a SHROI 04 must be filed to update denial reason codes and or denial reason narratives. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mike to cover the eClaims topics.
Thank you, Patty. As Patty had mentioned, the news items, we now have the release 3.1 transaction reports, those SHROI PDFs posted to the board's website. This occurred since the last August webinar, and you'll find those when you're on the eClaims webpage. There's now an option for transaction reports for 3.1 that you can click. Just as a reminder, while none of this has changed since release 3.0, these reports do have to be mailed to the injured worker and their attorney pursuant to 322 within 1 business day of your electronic filing with the board. The date such notice is actually mailed or transmitted shall be the date of transmittal, regardless of when it's received by the recipient. And section 110 has not changed, and that provides a copy of any employer's report of injury be provided to the injured worker upon request. So in this case, it would be the SHROI 00, as that's not a mandatory mailing in that case. Again, as Patty mentioned, I would highly encourage you to visit that transaction reports page. While for the most part, they'll remain the same, you'll find the new data elements on there, such as part of body, for example, so you'll be able to see what the changes look like with some of those new data elements on the SHROI PDFs. And as always, if there's questions after reviewing that, you can always reach out to the eClaims team. We also wanted to go over the upcoming onboarding testing for release 3.1. As you know, it's set to begin in October. So you just wanted to do a quick refresher regarding that. Any of the information I'm about to go over can be found in our implementation guide that's posted on the eClaims website. If you have not reviewed it since mid-September, I would encourage you to go download a recent copy of it. We did post an updated version of it on September 16th. The major changes in there, there is now actually a revisions page at the beginning of the document. So any further changes to the implementation guide are documented in the front of that guide, so that way you know what changed easily within the document. Some of the important changes we made since the last posting, the board is conducting our testing with trading partners from October 12th through January 7th of 2022. We again recommend that trading partners become familiar with the 3.1 IAIBC standard if you have not already done so. That would include familiarizing yourself with their implementation guide and any of the data element changes that have occurred since 3.0. If you have not already done so, we also highly recommend that trading partners attend at least one training held by the IAIBC. Information can be found on their training site. They do also offer virtual trainings that you can attend through different means as well. Most importantly, though, trading partners are encouraged to begin testing as soon as possible after that October 12th start date. As we noted above, testing only runs through January 7th of 2022. So we expect you to get through test A, B, and C by January 7th. So we do encourage you to start testing as soon as possible. And as always, if you have questions during that testing, to reach out, or if there's any problems with beginning testing early and shortly thereafter, October 12th, to please let us know. The test plan for flat filers, we just want to go over at a high level. Reminder of what that includes. You can find this within section 3.7 of the implementation guide. The required tests are test A, the single data file for Froys only, test B, which is 2 data files of Froys and Shroys, test C, which is a single data file Shroys only, and test D, which is 1 or 2 data files and can be Froys and or Shroys as needed. Typically test D is just reserved if you want to continue testing, you're able to do so. During the testing period, the submitter uploads the test data file as specified to the board's SFTP server. That's the same test files that you use today, or test folders that you use today for release 3.0. Once that file is uploaded, the email to notify the board is the eClaims support email. It's very important that you do let them know the file has been uploaded so it can be processed. We also encourage you to email the eClaims 3.1 email as well. That will allow us to be aware that that file is being processed by our technical team, and also allow us to begin scoring that file. As noted previously, it's a 90% acceptance rate to move from one test to the next. As I had mentioned, we will process that file. You will receive an acknowledgement file back on the server that you'll be able to download, as well as any PDFs that get generated as well to download. In addition to that, we will also communicate separately any passes or failures regarding that file. Also important is any acknowledgement to a test file will contain that T in the test production indicator in the header record. After the board returns those results, you should submit your next test file within 3 business days. As I mentioned earlier, we highly encourage that you start testing early, and that way you can move through the testing successfully. The other thing I do want to mention here regarding tests A, B, and C, during test C, there is a Shroy sync up, the Shroy SU that gets submitted. That is a new maintenance type code, and one that when you submit it, it has to have prior approval of the board or it would be rejected. When you are testing, if you wish to test getting a rejection on the Shroy sync up for your system, just to make sure that you can intake that acknowledgement and the rejection, that's perfectly acceptable to the board, but you would still be expected to also submit a Shroy sync up successfully. And what that would involve is emailing the eClaims 3.1 mailbox with the WCB case number, the claim administrator claim number, and the sender name of who you're submitting the Shroy sync up for. We will then authorize that Shroy sync up, and it can be included in the next test file for acceptance. For web data entry testing, as we had previously communicated, existing Release 3.0 web data entry trading partners, you're already approved to submit through web data entry, and there's no formal testing plan for Release 3.1, but we will be providing you the opportunity to access a separate Release 3.1 test environment. We do encourage you, if you are using that, to also review section 3.12, the web entry testing and instructions in the implementation guide. You can use that testing plan as a guide for submitting. This will allow you to gain experience and note any changes to the web data entry application for Release 3.1. And we will be sharing the links to both the 3.1 web data entry testing link, as well as the eClaims Inquiry 3.1 testing link in the very near future, closer to the October 12th date. So do be on the lookout if you do get the email blast from the eClaims team regarding webinars and other announcements. You will be included on the list when that link is provided. There is no new accounts needed. Any existing web data entry user will be able to utilize the test environment with their existing credentials. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Patty, Kim, and Sue so they can do a web data entry demo of the new 3.1 environment.
Thanks, Mike. Attempting to share my screen.
So you should be able to share now.
And while Sue is working on the screen there, I just wanted to mention we did have one question regarding vendors and their customers. And if you use an EDI vendor, you will actually just be having your vendor test. Not every customer for that vendor has to test. The vendor will be working directly with the board to pass the testing, and once they pass the testing, that will authorize them for all of the trading partners submitting through that vendor. We are not requiring every trading partner through a vendor to test individually.
All right, if I did this right, everybody should see a Freud 00.
Yep.
Yes. So Kim and I are going to be showing you today some of the changes to the Freud 00 and the Freud 02 in Release 3.1. And it basically looks just like we previously had in 3.0. But one major change that we have is in the employee injury section. So I've partly filled this out because nobody wants to watch this entire thing be filled out. So we have nature of injury. Down here we have part of body injured location code, and part of body injured fingers and toes location code. So first we fill in part of body, and we have a list like we're used to. We're going to put in fingers. Here you have the choice of bilateral left or right. And then for fingers or toes, it gives you the option of your ring, index, middle, or small finger. So for demonstration purposes, I am going to fill this in twice with the same injury site, so you can see what would happen should you do this by accident. Cause of injury, traumatic injury, just like previously, and then of course your accident description. Everything else we have filled in, just like you normally would have previously, and I'm going to submit this and hope it didn't time out on me. And as we expected, oh. You still forget things sometimes, even if it's not on purpose. This errored out because I have two of these same exact sites listed. So we will just go in and change this to...
So can you click on that part of body injured? Yeah,
this?
so that's going to, yeah, because that's going to show them exactly
Oops.
the error that they're receiving. So part of body injured fingers, toes location code cannot be duplicate for a body part. Instead, use the bilateral.
So I'm just going to use index instead of ring. So we have two different fingers. Nothing else is red. And we have success. I'm just going to write this case number down just in case. And we're going to go on and fill in a Freud O2. So this looks a lot, exactly, actually, just like we're all used to. So we are going to make this a lost time. So we're going to put indemnity for lost time up here, leave it with liability. We're going to put in a return to work date. Submit. So this box is new. This is our change elements, and it tells us what was added, initial return to work date, and that we updated the claim type code. Then you go back and you continue. And we have errors. And my error is telling me that an initial return to work date, I have data elements missing on the change variable segment, and the error is E. Can you see the population restrictions?
Yes.
Good. And here is our error. If initial return to work date is present and day claim administrator had knowledge of the injury is greater to or equal or greater to 1/1/2008, and the latest value of any of the following DNs have a blank or null value, initial return to work type code, and initial return to work physical restriction indicators, then all of the DNs listed above that have a latest value of blank or null must be included in the change variable segment. So we will go back. Let's fill in our initial return to work type code. We're going to put actual, initial return to work physical restrictions indicator. We will say no. And latest return to work with the same employer. We are going to say yes and submit. So we get our changes again. We've added an initial return to work dates, initial return to work type code, initial return to work physical restrictions indicator, latest return to work with the same employer, and as we know, we updated claim type code.
So I know many of you aren't used to looking at the population restrictions, but when it comes to these different change, the O2 loopholes, you are going to have to refer to these. It will give you the letter and highlight the DN that it's on, and you'll have to go look and see what you're missing. Obviously, in this one, it only makes sense that if you're giving us an initial return to work date, you should also be giving us the initial return to work physical indicator and the initial return to work the same employer. And Sue, I believe that's what you're missing is the initial return to work with same employer.
Oh, I had latest instead.
Yes. Yep.
It's the glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And we have success. So there's just a little sneak peek, a little look at what the O will look like with the new injury codes and the body parts and the Froy 02 with the Froy changes.
And if you are an all-web user and you want a little more in-depth view of this, definitely feel free to reach out to the eClaims 3.1 mailbox, and we'll be more than happy to try and set something up to give you a web demo of some of these changes in 3.1 a little more in depth. And Patty, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Kim and Sue.
And as far as questions so far, Patty, it's just the one about the vendors that I answered earlier, that if you use a vendor, your vendor will be testing on your behalf, and you do not have to test individually with the board for 3.1 EDI. There are no other questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So this is normally our question and answer period, but as Mike said, there are no questions. So I guess we will go ahead and end here. As a reminder, so before we conclude today's presentation, I want to make sure you're aware of the methods to stay informed on eClaims news and upcoming engagement opportunities. You can visit the eClaims website at wcb.ny.gov to stay up to date on eClaims news. You can also sign up to receive news straight to your inbox. This is how we will be communicating future engagement opportunities throughout the course of the BIS project. Visit the eClaims site and select WCB notifications within the eClaims overview section. Questions, comments, and feedback on the eClaims EDI 3.1 upgrade can be emailed to the eClaims 3.1 mailbox at eClaims31@wcb.ny.gov. Questions regarding existing eClaims EDI 3.0 should continue to be sent to the eClaims@wcb.ny.gov mailbox. You can also follow the board on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. A recording of this webinar is going to be placed on our YouTube and eClaims website, as well as FAQ spawned from the questions being asked during this webinar. So keep an eye out for these resources, as well as a follow-up email and survey. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time today.